The Alberta government announced on October 7th that it's going to put in place a geothermal policy framework and regulatory framework to encourage geothermal development in Alberta. So we're going to talk to Alison Thompson, who's the chair of the Canadian Geothermal Energy Association. They have a very specific regulation that they'd like to see that will make better use of wastewater, the hot water, that energy that's in that water. And it would just take a directive from I assume, the Alberta Energy Regulator. So welcome to the interview, Alison.
Thank you. And you mentioned in the last conversation that we had that I'm from the oil and gas patch. And so a lot of the learnings that I have and the ideas I have about geothermal have stemmed from that prior experience. And one of the things that I was a part of in my young career in oil and gas was when Alberta Energy Regulator introduced Directive 60. And Directive 60 is an industry flare gas initiative aimed at where it is economical to conserve that resource, that flare gas. A company would need to do that. But of course, that key word there is economical. So if it's economical for the company to conserve it, it means that they're actually making more profit or making more revenue for themselves. And when I look at the landscape in Alberta, and there's a lot of talk about using abandoned or orphan wells for geothermal, I'd like to move beyond that and really start working with the producing wells. Many wells are above this magic number, about 40 degrees Celsius. Not all of them can make electricity, which is above 100 degrees Celsius. But for anything above 40 degrees Celsius, if that water or that fluid, that co-produced fluid, that brine is coming up with the oil or the gas, or the water cut as we would call it, if that's economical to then use with an entrepreneurial company such as a greenhouse or a fish farm, barn heating, which is, livestock. I mean, really, the sky is the limit. It's more Imagineering at this point than engineering. I'd love to see there to be a Directive 60G, G for geothermal, where that we embrace the idea, conservation of resources, that we've already brought this to the surface. We've had the stakeholder negotiation. We've had the land disturbance. Let's use that. And I think this is going to open up a widely popular entrepreneurial sector of using heat that otherwise would need to be burned with natural gas or propane. And this type of Directive 60 is what I like to introduce to the government and see what they think of it.
So let's talk about a practical application of this, because I've talked to other entrepreneurs who are turning old well sites into solar farms, for instance. And one of the things they've talked about is how a lot of the infrastructure is already there. So that would be true of a producing well or a battery. And there seems to be the opportunity to take that heat, and I'll bet you there are farms within a reasonably short distance where you mentioned a barn, there would be dairy operations, there'd be hog operations, all sorts of different types of operations. Is that kind of what you have in mind?
Well, look at you, Markham. In the space of just our conversation, you're now listing off all kinds of these entrepreneurial opportunities. And that's exactly what we're talking about. I think people are too focused right now on the abandoned and the orphaned well, or the actual well. But what you just described is that there's a road, there's a lease that's been cleared, there's usually an electricity hookup. All these things that are startup costs are already there. Let's use them.
I think that's a terrific idea, Alison, and I'll look forward to chatting with you in the future about how the government received your idea.
Thank you very much.